Hey folks, today I want to go over a little bit of what is JavaScript. JavaScript is something that it's important to understand how to learn it, and I know some people are having a little bit of trouble in the class and picking up how it works. This is not necessarily going to go into how JavaScript works. There's a couple other videos I've done for that, and we'll do some more, but this is going to be a video more about what is it and how do you learn it. So JavaScript is the programming language used by pretty much every web browser. It is the programming language of the web, which is why we're covering it in this class. It's also gaining a lot of popularity with backend development, and can also be used for mobile apps as well as desktop apps. Basically, everything you see can probably be programmed in JavaScript. So it's a really valuable language to learn. It's not always the best choice for some of those things, but knowing it can give you a bit of a head start on learning other languages as well. So every programming language, JavaScript included, is just a language. Just like English or Spanish or French, there are rules for the language. For example, in English, it doesn't, if you want to say, I went to the bank, you wouldn't say, went I to the bank. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. There are rules for how sentence structure needs to be put in place. JavaScript statements and how those are set up are no different from that. They're just a series of rules in the language that you need to memorize. You can put together groups of characters to mean things. So in a language like the word, let's say the word group here, that's what is that, 6 letters? 6 letters, which on their own mean something, but put together they mean something different. JavaScript is very much the same. If you see something like an if statement with a parenthesis, that's basically the same concept. It's a group of characters put together that means something in that language. Certain groups can mean certain things. The word run is a noun in English. It's also a noun conjugated in a certain tense. The word var, var in JavaScript also has a certain meaning. That's the character you use to indicate that you're about to declare a variable. So if I say run in English, there's a couple different contexts that you can assume off of that. I could be saying run away or run faster. And you know that when I say away, I'm not saying to throw something away, I'm saying to run away because run came first. Similarly, in JavaScript, if you have that var first, you know the next thing that comes after it is going to be a variable name. You can use the context of what comes into it. So you can use a lot of the same techniques of learning a new language, new spoken or written language to learn JavaScript. Similarly, smaller chunks of the language can be put together to make larger pieces. For example, putting words together to form a sentence, like this, or putting sentences together into a paragraph. In JavaScript, you can take statements and put them together to make other statements, to make functions full of statements, and eventually make a program, which is kind of similar to a book. It's just a bunch of statements that are all together and have shared context. If in a book I introduce a character called Mary, and then 4 sentences down, I said, she went to the store. You know that she refers to Mary because it's in the context of that book. Similarly, when writing a JavaScript program, if you've declared a variable, you can use that variable later on in the program, and the program has context of that variable. So looking at an example in English, the person went to the store. Here, the person and store are nouns, or the person and the store are like the subject of the sentence. The person is the thing that did the action. The store is kind of the thing that the action was done to, and went to actually is the action here, where the person went to the store. You couldn't really take out these. If you took out the person, it would just be went to the store, and you wouldn't know who went to the store. If you took out the store, you wouldn't know where the person went, and if you took out went, you just say the person to the store, which doesn't really tell you what they did. Similarly, you can see we can just swap the person with the dog and the store with the park. It's still the same sentence structure. So we've got a subject, a verb, subject. Subject, verb, subject. This is important, and we do this almost instinctively. We understand the various sentence structures that we can use because we've been using them for a very long time. JavaScript is no different. There are various structures and grammars that you just need to memorize on how you would do stuff and then you put them together. So let's look at JavaScript. Var name equals Bob. This is a very similar thing where var name equals is the operator here. Just like went is kind of the operator in English, equals is x equals y. Bob is the y, and var name is the x. And just like in English, we can switch those. Oops, not that yet. So if I said var place and then equals and then store, this would still be a similar syntax. It'd be the similar structure of var something equals something else, but the names are slightly different. You can also take multiple statements and string them together. So in English, Bob went to the store. He bought eggs there. And then JavaScript, var name equals Bob, if name equals Bob, console log name plus went to the store. So what I've done here is each one of these at the top is a sentence in red. Bob went to the store and he bought eggs there. You can see the period is what tells us the sentence is over. So we say if we took out this period, it would be Bob went to the store, he bought eggs there, which you kind of understand what it means, but it's not grammatically correct. You would want to put a period in there to indicate that that action is coming to an end and you're moving on to the next action. Similarly, here in JavaScript, we have var name equals Bob, then a semicolon, which indicates we're done with that action. The next action is if name equals Bob, and then these brackets here, it's kind of a little more complicated in the period, but that indicates that what comes after here kind of, we're done with the if action, but what comes after belongs to that. Then we've got another statement, this console log here, and it also ends in the semicolon. So the grammar of JavaScript is a little more complicated than the grammar of a language. And the reason for that is we need to it's kind of like more like the grammar for mathematics. We need to indicate very complex concepts. So if you were doing this in English, you would say, his name is Bob. If his name is Bob, then I'm going to say that Bob went to the store. And so you kind of have that if his name is Bob in there. And in English, we can parse context clues and figure out most of the time what that means. The computer isn't as smart as us, so it needs to be much more specific. So, how would you learn JavaScript? Treat it as you would any other language. So, if you are English as a second language, treat it how you learned English. If you have English as a first language, but you learned Spanish in high school, for instance, similar thing. It's a lot of memorization, it's a lot of practice, memorizing common phrases. You might memorize where is the bathroom so that if you're in a foreign country, you don't accidentally have an accident. You can ask people how to get to the bathroom. You can also memorize for let I equal 0, I less than array dot length, I plus plus, and that is the phrase that you need to give the computer in order to loop or iterate over an array. These are just examples, just like you might memorize a dozen common phrases. You might memorize 50 common phrases in a language. You can also do the same thing for JavaScript. Memorize and write down and practice on those common blocks or operations that you need to be able to perform. A good example would be how to fetch an element from the DOM, how to create an object, how to get a key out of an object, how to console log something, how to set a variable. These are all things that you should memorize and know how to do just so that you know how to pull them up if you need them. Have a dictionary. Whenever you learn a new concept or a new structure of a sentence, write down what the structure is, how you used it, what it means, when you would use it. So if you're learning another regular language, non-programming language, you might write down how to do that Bob goes to the store in that language. You would say, okay, here's the word, the verb I would use, here's how I conjugate that tense, and here's where I put the nouns in that syntax. Do the same thing for JavaScript. Once you learn how to create a variable, for instance, write that down and write down some data on why those things go in that way. What do they mean and when would you use it? Practice putting them together. Similar when you would practice translation into a foreign language, you can even do the same thing. Write a concept of what you want to do in English or whatever language you're most comfortable with, and then try to use your dictionary of JavaScript to translate that in. It's going to be really complicated at first. It's just like if you're learning any other foreign language, but you'll get better at it as time goes on. You don't have to do it perfectly. There's many ways to say a phrase in any language. Some of them are not grammatically correct, but they're still understood. For example, the boy went to the store. If I say the boy to the store went, you kind of think I'm talking a little bit like Yoda, but you understand what I mean. He went to the store, the boy did, is actually grammatically correct English. It's just a little archaic. It still works. And the computer, it's not completely as smart, but it needs all the pieces. But if they're slightly in different orders, it'll understand. So look at these three JavaScript sentences. They're a little different, each one of them. And the one at the bottom is very different. But the computer still understands each one of them and understands what you're trying to do, and they all will essentially accomplish the same task. And an important thing to bear in mind too is the computer will not make fun of you for getting it wrong. Um, so don't feel embarrassed if you write the code wrong. It'll give you a syntax error if it doesn't understand what you're saying, and it might not do exactly what you're asking. Like if you went and we're asking someone in a foreign language if they could give you a box of biscuits, and you misspoke and you asked them for a box of crackers instead, you're going to get a box of crackers. And then when you get those crackers, you realize, oh, I made a mistake. I need biscuits. The computer is the same way. It's going to do pretty much exactly what you're asking it to do. And if it gives you the wrong thing, then you just need to look at, okay, why did it think that's what I meant? What did I tell it wrong? It's just like learning a foreign language. You can do it if, and a lot of the same techniques apply. Good luck.